Welcome back. I'm Charles Hancock, and this is Charles Hancock Creations, and in today's video, I just wanted to go through 3 of my oldest sketchbooks that I still have and talk about my own art history, things that I wanted to learn, and how I've evolved as an artist. So, post haste, no time to waste. Let's start talking about some of these sketchbooks. So first I need to give a little context. Multiple times in my life, I've lost everything that I own, and that includes old sketchbooks, old pieces of art, doodles I did on school papers and on the back of church programs. I lost some of those things to fire and some of those things to ignorance and youth. Bad decisions. Somewhere I imagine my grandmothers and my stepmother have artworks of mine, and I will attempt in the future to get a hold of some copies of those, if not the originals, so I can share those as well. Let me know down in the comments if you think that would be an interesting idea for a video. I had drawn most of my life, and I was 24 when I started this sketchbook. Now, right now, you might be thinking, that's a 24-year-old sketch? Actually, this was some children you'll find in my sketchbooks. I like to let children draw in my sketchbooks. I think it's a cool way to boost their creativity and encourage them to be involved in the arts. So occasionally you'll see some children's artwork in my sketchbook. Some more children's artwork. So I noticed it might be hard to see some of this. I grabbed another sheet of paper so I can use it as a divider so you can see more of the detail. These are just sketches that I did. This is a sketch of a woman. Obviously, I was trying to figure out shape and form. This is a bear sketch that I just did with probably some pencils, and then went in and laid over just some Sharpie markers. Back then I used fine point Sharpies a lot. I liked how bold they looked on the white paper. I recognize that some of these drawings aren't going to be necessarily YouTube appropriate, so I will try to edit and shoot them so it crops out the parts that might cause an issue. Now this one may be too graphic for YouTube. We'll see. Anyhow, this was just an illustration idea I was doing, thinking about advertising at the time Axe was popular. I wasn't even aware of Axe necessarily, but I got their campaign idea for men and how they wanted to entice men, and I just decided to do something along that line for women. Here again is another interesting sketch. I kind of like the forced perspective, but the anatomy is terrible in this. As you'll notice, I have a lot of female drawings at this point in my life. I felt quite insecure about my ability to draw women, and I used a lot of various reference to construct these sketches. The ones that I felt like were going in a positive direction, I would continue to elaborate on and add more detail, moving from pencil into pen and ink. This is a sketch of a girl that I met at an event. These were all very basic sketches, just a general face, basic ideas, doing some quick expression studies, just almost expression gesture studies, trying to get eyebrow shapes, different nose shapes, face shapes, playing around with facial forms. I've been drawing since I was 2 years old, and at this point is when I felt like I really started to take it seriously. It had always been more of a therapeutic thing, done for fun. So every time I would put something in my sketchbook such as this, I was always looking at how realistic it looked. I wish I had the reference photos to compare them to them so you can see what I'm talking about more, but I think we get the general idea. If I'm not mistaken, this is from a catalog. I was using a lot of clothing catalogs in order to improve my female drawings as well as my clothing. I really have always felt self-conscious about my ability to draw clothing as well. So fabric folds, I was also working on a lot at those times. You will see a greater improvement from these sketchbooks to where I am now in 2021 than my childhood sketchbooks in here. I just didn't take art as seriously at the time. I just did it more as fun and didn't push myself to grow in any real way until about this period in my life. Another one of the models that I saw in a clothing catalog, I believe this was a set of pajamas. I really was intrigued by the picture, I remember, because of the contrast in the photo, and I was trying to capture that contrast with the ink pen. This obviously was a female anatomy study. I was trying to simulate a realistic female form, maybe without so much glamorization, just some head sketches. And this was me trying out a sketch of just a Native American, and I didn't know at this time that I was actually developing quite an interest in doing artworks based around Native American life and mythology. And I want to take a point here to stop and reflect on something that I'm noticing. At this point, I couldn't tell. Looking back on it in retrospect, I see how stiff these figures were, and I know part of that comes from the way I was copying reference, trying to almost photocopy reference. And I can also see here in the way that he is sketched that my stroke was much more jagged, and I was less confident in how I was moving my wrist, how I was directing whatever utensil it was that I was using. You can tell here, I'm going to zoom in for a second. And if we look right here on this hip and buttocks and outer part of the leg, you can see how jagged these marks are here. Not that this is a bad sketch or that the concept itself is terrible. You can see the lack of confidence in my ability to make these forms. Also, at this point in my skill development, I didn't understand how to loosen things up and make them look natural. Again, these forms are very stiff. Another lingerie model, I think if you look at her face here, some of you may be able to discern who this might have been modeled after. Again, trying out the female form, trying to improve. Again, working with the contrast, trying to show contrast in forms, defining shape by the contrast. Here we have another sketch of a model from a catalog. A lot of these are going to be very stiff as we go through them. Another model, this one obviously nude. This one I must have liked the way she looked or the pose in which she was. I was more confident because I started going in over my pencil sketch with ink. I like this pose. In fact, this is a kind of pose I may actually try to do again in a current anatomy sketchbook. So as we see here, this is a piece that I think perfectly reflects 20s angst and misanthropy. Fortune favors the bold. I guess I was also trying to motivate myself and others in some way, but I scrapped this entire piece, and I think we'll see a piece in another sketchbook that was a more developed idea. Really enjoyed drawing skulls, but they were all more caricature and based on emotion and not any sort of knowledge of anatomy. So that is something that also I've worked on since then, and I'm always trying to improve on. Here we see another attempt at a skull and ribbon concept. This one again, anatomically okay. This was probably ripped off of some other illustration that I saw online. Now we're getting into some more of that development and interest in Native American mythology and illustration like I was talking about earlier. This is a skinwalker, a attempt at a skinwalker, or somebody in transition to becoming a skinwalker. I actually like the idea, the concept. I think the anatomy was better. My feet though, that is an abomination. What the fuck is that? Jesus. That's a nightmare. Rob Liefeld would laugh at me. That's just terrible. I was impressed with this. I was moving ahead with this. I put this in ink. This was an attempt at a self-portrait at the time, and I wanted to kind of mark out the tattoos that I wanted in the future. Actually, only one of those do I have, and I'm okay with that. At this time, I was trying to work out pencil shading. I was working on defining my darks and using highlights to create form. The anatomy in this much better. I even see more confidence in the stroke. Overall, I think at this point I was becoming more comfortable in drawing people. Here I think was a concept of a Native American guy sitting in the falls at the James River in Virginia. I wanted the wind to be blowing his hair and the feathers to be blowing along with it. And I wanted a strong contrast from the overhead sunlight. I really like this idea and may come back and replicate this with my new skills, maybe in paint, maybe in marker, who knows. This was definitely taken from somebody else and improved and changed with my own modifications, but I cannot remember where I got the model from. I really liked the elongated body, and it gave me a chance to kind of work out a more elastic form. In order to loosen up the forms that I was drawing, I wanted my people to look more realistic and more animated. These were some of my more ironed out and successful pieces in my opinion. I decided to close in on facial anatomy as I realized trying to level up all of my anatomy studies at one time might have been overwhelming to me. Doing just the face for a while and closing in on faces and replicating skull structures, eyebrows, cheekbone ridges, nose lines, getting those things lined up became my first real checkpoint, if you will, in my art game. Ta-da! This was another one of those pieces that I had used a reference for but then had modified myself. I had changed facial structure, added the headdress, things like that. This is more of an Eastern Siouan style headdress. Maybe it was a little controversial, but maybe I wanted to be that. As I look back on it, I'm not as sad or frustrated by a lot of these pictures. I can see what I was developing and what I was trying to do, and as long as you're sitting down to draw every day with that thought, then you're doing all right, I think. This final piece in the sketchbook, this was me also working on munitions, lots of things. You see this is almost a culmination of the other things you see in the sketchbook. I have the female form, I have the high contrast, I have the pose, the anatomy. But this was the last thing. So that's that for 2009, 2010. So yeah, outside of a few more kids' drawings, that's that for that sketchbook. Sorry, there isn't a whole lot of stuff there that's new or interesting. It's always interesting to me, though, to look back in retrospect and see how things have changed. Also, I got something in the mail the other day, and I wanted to share it with you. Give me just a second. Recently, these came in the mail. From Rafi Perez of Rafi Klee Studios. I've shouted them out before. I'll leave a link in the description box to their channel. In 2021, I wanted to contribute to artists that have inspired me, so I purchased these stickers. Thanks Rafi Klee, and I'm excited to decide on where I'm putting these things. So this would be started in 2010, and as I notice here, I never finished dating it, which means I didn't feel like I had finished this. You can see this black tape here. That's actually marking off the first few pages of this sketchbook because not everything in these sketchbooks was necessarily for public consumption. So it's obviously a sketch I was doing of a journal of my day, and I didn't even finish the whole day. You can see I didn't have a whole lot of follow through, but already my sketches and my resemblance to myself, I think, was starting to develop and become more accurate. Here we have a buff turtle. I don't know what I was doing. It looks like Franklin the turtle had been hitting the gym. I don't know what was going on. Somewhere in my youth, someone mentioned that equine art was the height of fine art. I've always kind of remembered that in the back of my head, even though I don't necessarily agree with that idea. This was one of my earliest attempts at a horse that I think I've ever done. And I don't think it was terrible for a first time, but boy, I needed to work on some of that. And this was probably just from my head without reference. This was just me trying to remember what a horse looked like. Here we have some sort of pachyderm. I'm not sure if I was going for a mammoth of some sort or if I was doing a weird angle of an African elephant, but I'm not really sure. I hope we all can laugh. Obviously, this was a joke. Again, I've always had an interest in advertisements, especially antique and retro advertisements. Here we see I was working on some more head and facial forms. We have what looks like a Native American warrior about to throw a hatchet. Interesting concept. Anatomy is terrible, but even the body angle and shape, the form of it, the negative space around it, I think is actually very interesting. It's actually weird because it's kind of reminiscent of this pose that I recently did for the SLEW art contest. And on that point, I just wanted to state that I did not place in the SLEW art contest, but it was really fun to have competed. And a congratulations from me to everybody else who did participate and did place. It's been a while since I've been in an art contest. It was fun, and I look forward to more opportunities to participate in art contests. And I guess I should address my eye. I was just putting some stuff in a laundry basket and headbutted a dresser. So laugh all you want. Feel free to put your comments down beneath the video, and I'll let you guys get back into this. We look at these two poses together, we can actually see that there's a similarity here. I don't know if I can put my finger directly on it. Yeah, there's something there. So here we see another Yesan or Tutalo or Monacan or Saponi couple. I'm guessing they're Monacan. And I like the idea of this couple walking, not very organic. Again, very stiff in the way that the arm is raised up to hold his hand. What was cool about it, and that I thought was interesting, was I tried to do a turnaround and do the same couple from a different angle. And we see that's that same couple. Pretty cool, right? I don't think it was super successful. I was trying to see where I lacked in my understanding of anatomy, see people in different positions in my head so that I could correct those things, and by trying to turn the form, I might be able to see what it is that I was missing. I really like this drawing as well. This was an interesting time in my life. The sketch is just a young woman with her head laying down on some sort of table and her braid coming out from underneath her hair, a dream catcher above her head. But her anatomy is appalling. Her body here, not terrible. Not terrible at all. I think it's actually quite good. This arm probably needed to come out to about here. Her head would have been way up here. We wouldn't have even had the dream catcher in the picture. That person seems to be an entirely different person than that person. It's just not very good. It kind of reminds me of a Picasso in some weird way, but I don't know what that says. Here we see another female sketch, and we can see where I made an annotation already for a smaller head. Just by examining what I had done the same thing. Normal size, too small. So I needed to work on my proportions. Some guy looks like he's about to have a very bad day. Again, my proportions and annotation, bigger. Couldn't get my sizes right. I was too afraid of moving my drawing onto the other sheet of paper I couldn't figure out how to get my proportions right because I didn't know how to place my subject on the piece of paper that I was working with in order to provide myself the greatest room to finish it. This was such a problem that I had. You can see that I even started putting heads in the middle of pages and trying to work from the middle out because I was afraid to make things too big and have to stuff them in to the pages. Here I have a sketch of a Native American woman riding a horse across the water. This actually looks like a very similar attempt to that horse earlier. And then crossing the James down here. Here we go back to the other style of using the Sharpie markers over pencil. Again, it looks like I was using reference from out of catalogs and magazines. Another lovely young lady. Again, the proportions were off, but I felt like they were getting tighter. I was seeing where I needed to improve. Here we have another Native American lady. It even says Monacan Princess down here. Here's some sort of rock star lady. I'm not really sure where I got this from. I'm guessing it was a reference, but looking at it, I'm not quite sure how much of it was reference and how much of it was me figuring out anatomy. Here's some sort of pirate, maybe Blackbeard. I've always loved pirates since I was a very young kid. Growing up in Eastern Virginia, I have an appreciation for the ocean and maritime history. I enjoy the water and fishing, and I don't get to do it as much as I'd like. But pirates were always part of my interest. So this was a memorial piece from my father. I was considering turning this into a tattoo. I never got this tattooed, and I may want to, you know what, I would love to redo this piece. Not as a tattoo, but just for the love of it. Here we have a bowman and another bowman. This one I've called the Corn Thief. There's a lot of personal Native American history involved in some of these concepts. I really like the forms here, how fast he looks like he's running, but also how dramatic and unrealistic it looks, almost slapstick. It looks like another warrior with a tomahawk, people paddling a canoe down the James. These are all incomplete drawings. A little sketch of a couple in an embrace. I guess this was another attempt at a self-portrait, not as accurate as some of the even cartoonier ones at the beginning of the sketchbook, but I can tell I was still focusing on the contrast and trying to get this contrast to define shape. I actually recall modeling for this myself. Yeah, I really do recall. I remember where I was, what I was thinking. I was the reference for this. I was trying to work on my foreshortening. I like the idea. The concept wasn't terrible, but definitely angsty again. This was definitely an expression study I was doing. Just, you know, we look at that other sketchbook and we compare already just how much I began to take my artwork more serious from 2009 into 2010. How much more I was trying to improve, how much more I was trying to understand anatomy and form, gesture, and expression, and exaggeration. I'm pretty sure a lot of these were faces I made in a mirror, but then I tried to modify each individual feature in order to make them unique faces. But what an improvement in 1 year. Here I have a romantic Native American couple sitting underneath a tree. Here I have what is I'm pretty sure was a mama's boy, mother's boy. I'm pretty sure this was supposed to be like a son and a mother. This was some sort of character. I'm not quite sure who she is or if I was coming up with this character or whatnot. Her face, I look like I chopped that thing up like shark bait. But, you know, not the worst thing in the world. We were learning, and not everything in your sketchbook has to be a home run. It's a sketchbook. You're supposed to mess things up. These things aren't supposed to be refined. Dos Vidania. I don't know This was definitely from a reference photo. I'm pretty sure I still have this reference photo somewhere, and I may do something with it at some time, but you can tell once I got down to this point, I decided I didn't think it was worthy of finishing. I have here a guy entangled around a female with his head buried on her stomach, just lying in bed. It looks like she's not in the best of moods, and he doesn't really have a face, so I have no idea what the context was for this, if it was supposed to be aggressive or not, I'm not sure. But the theme continues with the next drawing. It's the human experience. And I don't know if I could have identified that at the time, and it seems so trite and basic, but there's something about the way art explains the human experience. A hand with an engagement ring. Not a bad hand study. I must have felt super confident in it. I can tell I scrubbed away all the structure that I was using to build these phalanges. Finishing the 3. Somebody trying to snag, isn't it? Yay! Funny enough, I'm pretty sure I was trying to work on weird head shapes, and I was doing something very similar to that this week. I made a post on Instagram, of me doing the same thing. Here I had another dramatic pose. I was definitely trying to work on foreshortening and poses. So here, this is actually an interesting piece. It was just a little sketch that I was doodling in this book, but at this time, personally in my life, my mother had just passed away unexpectedly at a younger age. And I found myself stuck in the Outer Banks for a little bit. This character seems to be sitting in some sort of prison yard. But this building right here bears a strong resemblance to a beach house. And I think subconsciously, even though I wasn't a prisoner in any real way, I was a prisoner of my mind. More interested in, I guess, filling the sketchbooks than I was filling the pages in the sketchbook. I'm gonna be honest, I am 90% sure that was supposed to be Nicolas Cage. Maybe you can see it. Let me know down in the comments if you can see Nicolas Cage in that. Here we have a tiny kissing couple, an Easter Island head and a pharaoh's head. I have no idea. Elongated skull. In my last video, which was about me entering the SLEW art contest, there was a comment that really stuck out in my mind. It came from my sister. And you may be sitting there going, well, what a weak shout out to shout out your sister. But as we become adults, we've kind of grown apart and we live far apart in distance. And it was awesome to see her name come up in my comments. Her comment said, "You're such an amazing artist, Charles. That's my brother." That's my sister, and I love her. Thanks for the warm comment. It's great to see you in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope all of you are enjoying the video as well. Let's get back into it. this reference. I don't know if I still have this around either, but I was working on my male anatomy. I've always felt more confident with male anatomy, and I think that's just simply because I am a man. I remember specifically at this point in my life that this is when I realized that I wanted to keep doing this, that I wanted to get better, that I wanted to figure out what the flaws were, and that I was identifying my own behavior. But it took until this point before I recognized it in myself. Just a skateboarding character. This wheel, well, this wheel less, but this wheel for sure should be more up underneath that board if the perspective was correct. Really was liking the way this looked. This is definitely from a reference of Maxumi Max. She is a burlesque and fetish model. At that period in my life, I like to use her a lot as reference. The position she chose to be in, or that the photographers put her in, were always interesting and intriguing. Here again, I went for the rock star look. At least my people were looking more like people. This anatomy could use some work right here, but I was starting to see what it was that I was doing, and I was trying to fix some of those situations. Boy, her hand though, what the oh my gosh, what is this? How would her hand be? Her hand, that is a nightmare. That is, ugh. Oh my gosh, stop it. Boy, this nautical star thing is terrible. I'm glad I'm not into that anymore. I like the way I was working with fabrics, trying to get a more realistic or even comic book style fabric look. This face right here is just terrible. The anatomy right here, her face is just, how in the, her nose, but she would have, so what it looks like is half of her head is just been chopped off, just ping. And we finish up this sketchbook with the more complete version of that sketch that I was talking about in the last sketchbook. These concepts. This was a more complete drawing, and as you can tell, I started to get my ideas of anatomy down better. I actually still think this one's pretty sick, and maybe I should redo this one as well. Thanks for stopping by, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Tell YouTube that you liked it. If you feel like I provide any sort of value, or you might be interested in seeing more of my videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon, and YouTube at least claims that they'll give you an update whenever I update a video to the channel. Don't forget to check me out on my other social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I would love to see you guys around there, and maybe we can communicate a little freer on those platforms. Otherwise, life is what you make it, so make life good. I'll catch up with you guys soon. Right?